Hello, welcome to another episode of What Are You Selling with me, David Green. And joining me today, I am delighted to bring you the author that everyone knows in the indie scene, Rob J. Hayes. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really good. Wednesday is, which the day we're recording it, is my main writing day. So got a lot of stuff done today, and I'm ready to stop writing and talk about writing, I suppose.
Yeah, kind of. They're related, so it's a nice little segue, I suppose.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So you're in the UK, which is great because obviously we didn't have to faff around with time zones and everything like that, which is always a minefield, and they always get it very, very wrong. So whereabouts in the UK are you?
I live in Derbyshire, in a little town called Belper.
All right, yeah, I know it.
It's quite small. I mean, it's growing. Seems like it's growing by the day, to be honest. But yeah, it's quite a small little thing. We've got like one cinema with a single screen on it, so it's that small that I'd never get to see any films until they go on to Netflix and Amazon and all that.
Right. My town where I live does not have a cinema yet, but I was saying to someone the other day, I was like, because it's the same. I was telling you before we came on, I've pretty much not been able to leave the house for 2 weeks, and went out for a walk this morning to take my son to preschool, and there's like a whole new road they were building near us. I was like, what's gonna? I have to build a cinema and never have to leave this place.
Yeah, be lovely. Although, as I say, if it's a small cinema, you either have to avoid spoilers or just accept the fact that whatever you watch, you're already going to know everything about it.
Right.
The gymnastics I had to do to avoid as many Spider-Man spoilers as possible, because I only watched it a couple of weeks ago. I was just like, yeah, well, I kind of knew all the other heroes and villains that were in it. So
right, because they do this weird thing, don't they? Because I thought the new it's obviously Star Wars Day today. The new Obi-Wan trailer came out. I watched it before, but they always do this kind of weird thing where it's like, and Marvel are terrible for it. It's like they'll try and hide stuff in the trailers for ages, and then literally the day the film comes out, they'll release like TV spots where it's like, here's all the spoilers for it, and it's like, well, wait maybe for the first weekend, maybe.
Yeah. To be honest, I tend to hate trailers anyway. I'll watch like a teaser trailer maybe of the thing, but then I find that by the time the thing comes out, there's usually been like 3 or 4 trailers, and most times you're like, well, I know everything about the film now. You've literally spoiled everything that's going to happen in that film.
Yeah.
And I find it really disappointing. So I tend just to try to stay away from them as much as possible.
Right. Yeah.
Like the old days where I seem to remember the first trailer for the first Star Wars told you nothing about anything. It was just like, hey, spaceships and lasers, get on it. That was pretty much the entire trailer.
Yeah,
it worked perfectly.
Which is weird as well, because the book had been out for 6 months, because they made the book of the film by Alan Dean Foster. And it came out because it was meant to come out at Christmas '76, wasn't it? And it ended up getting pushed back to May or whatever. But the book still came out. And they're like, yeah, this is fine. Go and read it. Right.
I mean, did anybody read the book of Star Wars? Everybody just watched it, the film.
But there's some great. I do love a really weird thing where it's like kind of like self-sabotage, because on the Star Wars thing again, I imagine we're around the same kind of age, so we remember a lot of these things. When the Phantom Menace came out and they released the soundtrack like a week before the movie came out, and one of the tracks was called Qui-Gon's Noble End. It's like, someone's going to notice that. I think that
a little bit of a spoiler that this character might, pop his clogs.
Yeah. But that's the way, and that's I suppose, like, that's one to kind of ease into talking about books. I suppose it's one of the it's a tough thing sometimes to talk about your own books. I find when people say, "Tell me what your book is about," and not to spoil anything about it, because it's kind of like you want to tell them all, like, especially when it's fantasy, because there's. I say that because you can say that about any genre. Like, I've written a crime thriller novel, and like if you try and describe like a crime thriller, it'll sound like every other crime thriller that's ever been made, right? If you just do the broad strokes of it. And like, fantasy is the same and horror is the same. So you want to kind of just like get to the bits that are like unique about it, but then it's like, I'm telling you too much.
Yeah. I hate it. I remember back when I released my first one, The Heresy Within, people would be like, "Oh, so you've got a book out now?" I was like, "Yeah. What's it about?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It's got like witch hunters and magic and shit."
Right. Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, okay. What, like Lord of the Rings?" Sure.
Yes. Yeah. 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 You get that a lot.
Nothing like Lord of the Rings, though.
Nothing like it. Yeah. You get. I mean, I know you're a big Song of Ice and Fire fan. You mean I think on your bio you talk about the game that you play with cards. And these days you get a lot of people that are like, "So what do you write?" And it's like, no people in real life that you kind of bump into. And you're like, "Oh yeah, fantasy like Game of Thrones." Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you like Game of Thrones? Would you like to read my book?
Yeah. Well, that's just it. When you're like, "Oh, I like Game of Thrones," and you're like, "Yeah, sure, like that. Like, do you like it?" No. Oh, okay.
Nothing like it. It's nothing like it at all. It's kind of like
Yeah.
it's kind of like, well, what do you like about what fantasy do you like? It's exactly like that. Just give it a try.
Yeah.
Um,
I find connecting with people are fantasy fans that way is really easy, to be honest, because you can just be like, "Oh, right, okay, well, what about this one? Have you ever heard of Prince of Thorns?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, great." And connecting with people who don't read or consume fantasy at all, and you're just like, I have no way of talking to you about my book in any way that you're going to understand.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's really weird, and it was. I was when we were talking before we started recording. I was at EasterCon a couple of weeks ago, and I was watching a panel that had Adrian Tchaikovsky on it, and he was talking about how people that read speculative fiction like us will go out of our kind of comfort zone quite readily to go and read like a completely different genre, because a lot of those genres are like hidden inside of the things that we write. Because sometimes you might be like, "I'd like to write a murder mystery, but I'm going to just put it in a fantasy setting," or so this sort of stuff. So people that read speculative fiction will go out and they'll go and read other things, but people that kind of read like Lee Child or I'm just looking over at my wife's books over there because she doesn't read any of the stuff that I write, and she hasn't read any of the stuff that what else? The show, Jeremy Archer and people, Jeffrey Archer and people are, they won't come over and read anything else because like, I won't understand it. And it's like, well, what's there to really understand that's different?
Of course you will. It's a story. It's just like fantasy story is basically just a story, and it's not like it's going to drop a bunch of terms that you're not going to know. It's going to explain what you need to know about it as you sort of read it. But no, you're completely right. I've got friends who read quite a lot of autobiographies and the like, and they don't read anything else. They just read autobiographies. That's it. And yeah, I think my dad's missus, she only reads sort of crime fiction thrillers, spy thrillers with like Jack Reacher and the like. And that's it. She'll consume a rate of knots, but that's all she'll read.
That's all she'll read. Yeah. Well, that's the way of the world, I suppose. It's for, and it's a good job. There's a lot of fantasy readers because there are a lot of fantasy books, right? And, a lot of fantasy writers. So when did you decide that? I mean, your first book was published 2013, April 2013.
That's correct.
10 years. Congratulations, just passed it.
Almost 9 years.
Oh yeah, sorry,
we're 2022.
What year are we in?
I don't know.
Oh
they all blend into one. We're still in 2020, man. We're still in 2020.
Yeah, exactly. I just think of it as 2020, 2020 part 2, 2020 part 3. So I'm not sure which one we're in at the moment, but obviously 2020, we're not in 2023 yet. We're not in 2023, just in case.
We're not. It's still 2022. So yes, it's just over 9 years, not quite the decade yet.
9 years. Okay. We'll send you a cake or something next April. So when did you decide that you wanted to be a writer? I presume that you've always been a big reader of speculative, of fantasy and other things like that. So when did you decide you wanted to be a writer?
I used to write short stories quite a bit. Funnily enough, because it's May the 4th, I actually wrote some Star Wars short fiction, like fan fiction, a long time ago. It was basically an excuse for a bunch of lightsaber battles. But I used to sort of write short stories quite a bit. And then I remember, I think I was about 14 years old, maybe, and I read a series by Maggie Fury called The Artifacts of Power. And that made me want to give writing longer fiction a go. So I had my first ever attempt at a a full-length novel, which was terrible. And luckily, it has probably burned up on a hard drive somewhere because that thing never wanted to see the light of day. And it wasn't until I was 26 years old that I decided that I actually wanted to try giving like proper being a writer a go. I was in Fiji, funnily enough, on a desert island. I was spending 3 months on a desert island doing marine research, and I took this little leather journal with me, which at the time I thought, I'll take this journal and I'll write down my experiences. I'll keep a daily journal, and there was no entries in there. And then about halfway through my time there, I had just had this idea for a world and some sort of like stories and characters in it, and I started writing them down. In fact, some of those short stories made it into my little short story collection, the Bound Folio. And so I started writing these short stories in this little journal, and then at some point I went, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to dream and write for a living. So when I got back home from my my 3-month tour, I started trying to make a proper go of it. And then 3 years later, I published my first book.
Excellent. That's a pretty quick time from deciding, right, I'm going to do it, to going straight into, and it was straight into novels as well. It wasn't, like me, for example, I started publishing in anthologies and stuff first to kind of figure out what it was that I wanted to do completely. But you went straight into, I'm gonna do the novel.
I did, yeah. I mean, the first one I wrote was I hadn't figured out my voice, my style yet. So that one was very much a trunk novel. It sits there gathering dust, never to be seen. But then the second novel I started to write, which was set in the same world, just a different part of it, that turned into The Heresy Within in the end. So it was pretty much after I decided to sit down and do it properly. It was basically the second novel I wrote. That was my first one. But I did actually write all 3 novels in that trilogy: Heresy Within, Colour of Vengeance, and Price of Faith. And then I released them all on the same day.
Oh, excellent! That's
madness.
So how did that? Because obviously, you're a really successful indie author. You just need to look at and you're prolific as well. Like in the 9 years, you've released many works.
16 books now.
Yeah. And they're all really well reviewed, and lots of reviews as well. Which is the key thing. I mean, some of your books have got over thousands of reviews on them. How did that kind of, when you went in and decided, right, I'm going to release 3 books at the same time, how did that work out back in 2013? Did it go with how you expected, or were you just kind of learning stuff?
I had no expectations. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know any other self-published authors at the time, so I had nobody to ask about any of it. The covers were awful. I found a guy on DeviantArt and paid him 80 quid to do 3 character pieces. And so for 80 quid, you can imagine how good they were. And then my dad and I sat there on a copy of Photoshop and figured out the typography. So the covers were awful. The books weren't really edited because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know any editors. I knew nothing about it. And I just thought, well, they're all ready. So what I'll do is I'll drop them all on the same day. I'll put book 1 for as cheap as I can make it, which at the time was 77 pence or 99 cents America. And then I'll put the other 2 at $2.99 and we'll see what happens. And it turns out it worked really fucking well. I think I lucked into some Amazon algorithms, and possibly because I think season 2 of Game of Thrones was releasing as well at the same time, and they exploded. And in my first year, I sold something like 60,000 books, which I just thought were like, what the hell? So yeah, it surprisingly, it went really well, and I have no idea how really, and I cannot replicate it for love nor money.
some kind of black magic or something. Maybe you did something when you were in Fiji, like you did some kind of mystical kind of offering, and that's
something like that.
Yeah.
To be honest, it was a different time, and Kindle worked. Well, Amazon and Kindle worked very differently. Kindle Unlimited didn't even exist back then, so it was all sales as well. And yeah, I've heard a few authors who were publishing around the same time sort of describe it as the gold rush, because back then there weren't as many authors self-publishing. There weren't as many books out there already. So if you sort of like publish a couple of books or a few books and get a little bit lucky, yeah, you were sort of nailing it. Basically, you could rack up those sales, which I did.
Yeah. And so when you had your 3 books out, very, very successful. So what was the next thing? What was the next step for that? Were you like, oh, I need to write more in this world, or was it, let's go and do something a little bit different? And obviously you probably had people then getting in touch with you, asking you like, what's next, which is probably completely new for you at the time as well. So how did you kind of handle all of that?
Yeah, I murdered my career. So one thing I've learned, which is very important, is momentum. If you've got it, keep it up, keep rolling with it. Whereas what I did was had a very successful, very dark fantasy trilogy, and then I followed it up with a light-hearted steampunk romantic caper, which nobody wanted. And then to top it off, I also signed with an indie publisher and took my books down from publishing for 3 months. So I basically killed my momentum and stalled out my career, which was not a good idea. And it's something I'm still trying to sort of recover from a little bit, I think, but hopefully I have a bit.
Was that just the indie publishing, just the kind of small press, just didn't kind of suit, that model didn't suit you as well, your style, or was it just the lucky ones where it's kind of?
I mean, it wasn't too bad. Basically, the books went down for 3 months until they republished them anyway, which was a bit of a momentum killer. But then it wasn't too bad to start with, but it soon became clear that they were not operating in the best practices. That's a polite way of putting it. They screwed a bunch of authors out of a lot of money.
That happens with some of these for some reason, and it's like, it is. I suppose it was some of those things that happened quite a lot going back 5, 6, 7 years ago when it was kind of more new. Thankfully, they're easier to avoid these days.
They are, and I think for the most part, there's simply no need for them. I think most authors can publish their own books for, if they can afford it. You can do it for as little as like £1,000 quite easily, and then you don't need the indie publisher at all. Most of them provide no benefit. There are a few that are that are different and actually advertise books and give them good pushes. They can be worth it, but I still think the majority of indie publishing houses just provide no benefit to an author whatsoever. But I am slightly jaded by my experiences.
We'll talk about happier things. You won the 3rd ever Spiffbo.
I did.
So when
I've got a one somewhere. I don't know where it is now, but there's a little. It's lying around here somewhere. I don't know.
Did Mark Lawrence come around your house with it himself?
Oh, there it is. He didn't. He sent it to me, but there we go. There's my little Spiffbo 3 award with a handwritten note by Mark Lawrence.
Excellent. For
Where Loyalties Lie.
Yes, yeah. So how did that kind of whole process work? It seems like a very. I was kind of looking at it last year, and my book came out 2 days after the cutoff date, so I was like, I'm not going to bother. But then I was like looking at it, and it seems like a very long process, and it must be nerve-wracking just waiting for, because some of the places where they did the reviews are quite harsh on books as well. So how was that whole process?
Little spider just floated down. It is nerve-wracking, and it can be quite soul-destroying when you get one of those negative reviews. But yeah, it's weird, Spiffbo. If you go out in the first round before anything really happens, yeah, it's a bit nerve-wracking until your review comes up, and then it's a bit sort of like, well, I didn't make it. Oh well. But the biggest thing you'll get out of it is actually just being part of the community, because it's actually, for the most part, the Spiffbo community is quite large and it's very welcoming. It has a large group of authors as well who are quite supportive of each other. And I would say the best thing that I've personally got out of it is actually in Spiffbo 5, I think it was, when I entered with Never Die and made the finals with that book. And I made friends with the other finalists. Basically, all 10 of us were just hanging out, chatting in messenger groups quite a lot. And it's a friendship we keep up. We keep chatting with each other constantly. It's so nice to have that sort of like little community that you can just take part in. Because it reminds you that you're not alone. There's other people in here. They're slogging away as well, and they can offer advice or whatever, or just commiserations. Or
no. which is needed sometimes. And also, you go to someone and say, "Why have I done this? Why did I make this decision?" And they're like, "Yeah, I made that. I did that one time as well, and this is how you do to kind of recover from it."
Exactly. But there are some other benefits for Spiffbo. Obviously, you do get a bit more sort of coverage. Your book will get out there to more people, hopefully, especially if you do make like the finals. Mm-hmm. And there's always the possibility that a publisher may, notice you and pick you up if that's something that you are after. The list is now, I think, something like 8 books long for books that have been picked up by publishers.
Right.
That happened through Spiffbo, basically. So yeah, there are a lot of benefits to it, but it's a very nerve-wracking experience. And yeah, when those negative reviews drop, I mean, even my winning book, Where Loyalties Lie, one of the reviews it picked up was a 4 stars, and it was not a pleasant review.
Yeah, I was looking at some of because obviously the this year's has just been announced, or 2021's has just been announced, and I was looking at one place in particular that didn't seem to like any of the books that made the finals, and it was like, do you even like the books that you read at all? Like, some of these must be quite good, because there was literally hundreds of books in this competition.
Yeah, you do get a few these days. I think that I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems like some of the reviewers have realized that being a bit more on the critical end of things is good entertainment value.
Right.
So I think some of them may tone up the criticisms a little bit. I could be wrong, but that's just what it seems like to me. But like with any negative reviews, it's important to take it with a pinch of salt, because it's all subjective.
Yeah, with Spiffbo, obviously did great for you, and obviously winning it is massive. Winning any award is massive, and even being nominated.
I've got another one.
You got another one.
Yes, this one's another award as well.
Well, that is much bigger. That's much bigger than
this. Yeah. Oh, there we go. This one. See if you can see it.
Oh, 2019 Book Nest Fantasy Award
for Never Die. So yeah, those are ones.
Anyway. And it's a great book, so it's well deserved. Yes, yeah.
Yes, these are my 2 awards.
A wand and a sword. It's all you need, really, when going into
exactly. Battle. I can dual wield. I can be a spell blade. I've got no idea how Harry Potter works, but that is a Harry Potter wand. So
yeah, it is. Yeah. So that's for the defense. The other one's for attack. It's all good. So, and you mentioned meeting other authors and kind of getting into that kind of thing. Is that how? Because obviously, just to give Jed Hearn a plug as well with his with their podcast YouTube channel, and with Wizards, Warriors, and Words, which you are on pretty much every time it's on. Is that how you got into that?
Yeah. So basically, a couple of years ago, Jed read my the War Eternal books and really liked them, so he invited me on to his podcast because he just did a podcast where he interviewed authors and talked about books.
Right.
So he just sort of invited me on to do that, and decided that we got on quite well. Because we did. I think it's just because I treat these things quite formally anyway and just have a bit of a laugh. And then he'd also sort of like noticed the way that like me and Michael R. Fletcher and me and Dirk Ashton and the three of us sort of interacted online. So he just posed the idea, sort of like, getting all four of us on basically and seeing if we can do a podcast together, how it works. And it turns out it works quite well because we have a bit of a laugh, we chat around things, and occasionally we even make sense.
Right.
Occasionally.
Yeah. It's good. It's great. And people that are watching it, watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, if you've not checked out Jed Herne, and the links for all of Rob's stuff will be below in the show notes, and the link for the YouTube channel for Jed will be as well. Check it out, because I wish that I had found it a year or two earlier than what I did, because not only is it fun and it is funny and it's entertaining, you actually talk about stuff that's really helpful for authors as well.
It's I mean, we call it the Wizards, Warriors and Words Writing Advice Podcast. A bit of a mouthful, and it is. We covered like a whole range of topics, from sort of like how to get started writing, the intricacies of plotting, and how to be a pantser and a plotter, and all the way through to actually how do you actually publish your book and all that lot. And then occasionally we just have fun episodes with like a game show where we throw out each other's 1-star reviews at each other just for fun.
Yeah, they can be fun sometimes. I got one once, and it was the only time that I didn't want Amazon to remove a review off the site, because sometimes they just take ones away. It's like you get like a really good review and you're like, this is nice, and then it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah.
You're like, why did you take that? So I got a 1-star review one time, and I was like, I'd like this to remain, because I want to use it as an advertisement thing. Because it was like, because one of my books, like the first book in my like dark epic fantasy series, has got a female person of color on the cover of it, right? That is one of the main characters.
Well, you're going to get some 1-star reviews from some people, because people.
Yeah, right. And the review was, I am sick of this woke political bullshit, right? That was the title of the review. And then the review started going on saying how this person hates books that are about, and it was a verified purchase as well.
Yeah.
So it was like, I hate books that are about women. And it's like, well, what did you expect from the cover? Right.
Why buy it?
Yeah, and then it was like he was saying that I'm like I'm having a right go about me about writing women and having emotion in a story. It's like, I don't want to know about emotions in a story, this kind of stuff. And I was like, well, but there's quite a lot of swearing in it and quite a lot of stuff. So it got removed by Amazon before I could take all the best lines from it, because I was just laughing about it for so much. I was like, this is great. Yeah.
You can find some brilliant quotes in 1-stars, especially those which are a little bit over the top. Like I created a graphic for Never Die, because I noticed like with Never Die there were so many 1-star reviews that were they said just wild things like, this is the ending is an absolute trash fire. Somebody else saying the entire book was nothing but a lie, for a fiction book, or it feels like an Asian D&D adventure. So I was like, all right. Took a bunch of these 1-star quotes and stuck them on a graphic, and it's sold books because people just see all those and go, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, so I was like, because I think one of the lines was like, I don't want women that are not interested in men in my stories, basically. And I was like, that's great. I'm just gonna put that across the top of the thing and say like, out now. And they took it away, unfortunately. Yeah. So my advertisement would have been a lie, because there was no proof to back this thing up anymore. So I couldn't, in good conscience, put it on there anymore. But
you can still do it. I occasionally bring out the story. Even the review is long gone now, because he removed it himself. But when I released my first book, my uncle decided to give it a buy and a read. my uncle is quite devoutly religious, and my book was called The Heresy Within. And on the first page, it has some witch hunters burning a family alive.
Right.
So there's also a lot of swearing in the book, and I think he got about 15% in before he decided that this was not for him. And my uncle, being the erstwhile chap that he is, gave it a rating on Amazon. He gave it a 2-star rating and a review on Amazon, and pointed out on Amazon that he was the author's uncle. And then this was obviously as the book was doing really well, and there must have been sort of like 20 replies to his review saying, just calling him a horrible person for posting a negative review. I felt so bad. I literally rang my uncle, but I'm really sorry about this. These comments have nothing to do with me, and your opinion is perfectly valid. It's fine. But he took the review down anyway, because I don't think it was worth the hassle to him.
No, that's it. It's funny. I mean, it's funny when you get like, obviously you don't want that to happen to a family member, but it's funny when you get people that are so passionate about something that they're like, how could you? I have one on, I think on Goodreads. I think someone gave one of my books like 2 stars, I think, and someone just lost their mind about it and was like, how did you do that? Why? And it's like, it's fine, like, you know,
it's their opinion, they're allowed it, it's okay.
Yeah. But yeah, the heretical side of it is a funny one, because my other series is like an urban fantasy that is set in hell. Like, it's actually set on Earth, but Earth is hell. The main character finds out that heaven exists and hell exists as well. We all live in hell, like for reasons that he looks into. And I was expecting to get some comments from people about being quite blasphemous and other things, but then it's called The Devil Walks in Blood. So I was like, you know, people might avoid it if they see that, you know, those kind of people.
You would hope, but some people might be like, yes, that's going to be a bit of devil bashing in this one.
You'd think so. You'd think so. But
that's just it. I mean, I've got a few. There are a few clearly devoutly religious people who have read The Heresy Within and have left reviews on it. I'm like, I mean, I suppose it could be a bit of a misleading title in some ways, but I mean, maybe don't read books of heresy in the title.
Right. Yeah. Especially like fantasy ones, because they're probably not going to go the way that you're expecting them to.
No.
But let's just talk for a little bit as well, just about your influences, because obviously we talked about your writing journey, and we're going to talk about your new book that has just come out, and we can talk about that series as well. But what are your kind of influences as a writer? Because what I've noticed a lot with getting into the writing world and everything is that writers obviously at some point in their lives love to read, and they still do love reading, but not maybe have the time as much as they used to read as much as they used to do. So what kind of things do you enjoy writing, and what kind of series and authors do you like find inspiration from?
I mean, I love, I think epic fantasy is probably still my biggest love. I mean, I remember picking up like the Farseid trilogy, Robin Hobb's Farseid trilogy the first time, and just devouring it. And it remains one of my favorite fantasy series ever, and my biggest inspirations. And that's obviously quite epic fantasy. And you know, I draw inspiration from authors like Mark Lawrence. And funnily enough, I'm not so much on the classics like the Lord of the Rings and Wheel of Times and David Gemmell's.
Right.
I've actually never read David Gemmell. I've only just started listening to Wheel of Time.
I've only read one David Gemmell book, and I feel like a heretic every time people bring one.
I know, like people. I occasionally have people who are just like, "Oh, I can see David Gemmell in your work," and you're like, "Can you?"
Same. I'm like, that's interesting. That's really interesting. I'm like, yeah, cool.
Yeah. Sure, yeah, but no, I take inspiration from a lot of I guess the more sort of modern authors like Robin Hobb, Mark Lawrence, Chris Wooding are some of my favorites for sure.
Yeah.
funnily enough, I take quite a lot of inspiration from Brandon Sanderson, and I really like his works. I would not class him as one of my favorite authors, but I think he's such a damn good author at what he does
Right.
that I can definitely take inspiration from him. Things like world building and magic systems and everything. He's second to none, to be honest. So
yeah, he's great, and he's a machine as well. I'm the same. Like I enjoy his work. They're not like my favorites, but they're kind of like, exactly what you're gonna get when you get a Brandon Sanderson book. It's going to be certain quality. It's going to be it's going to hit all the marks that you want it to hit, and it's going to be pretty big.
Yeah, almost certainly. It's especially if you're listening. I tend to listen to Brandon Sanderson. You're going to get some value for your Audible credit.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. He's great, and obviously he's like a brand upon himself, isn't he? At the moment, like with his Kickstarter stuff and everything.
Oh God, yeah. What did it hit? 40 million?
41.7 million, I think, in the end.
Insanity.
Yeah. It's got a lot of work ahead of him getting those books out. That's probably what someone probably at some point was like, this has gone really, really well, probably too well. We have.
I don't know. It's Sanderson. He'll take a weekend off and he'll write 3 new novels. It's fine.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I'm with you on Robin Hobb. By the way, it's one of the ones that I always get really kind of excited when, because I know a lot of people really like Robin Hobb and they like it, but whenever I kind of ask people, what's one of your favorites, very rarely gets mentioned, and I think it's just. I think when I read it, I was teenager, I think, like a late teenager. I'd read some books in first person, like a lot of gothic horror and everything like that, but I'd never read epic fantasy in first person before, and got so that kind of deep into the character's psyche. And she does it so well. It's a great, and some of the relationship between Fitz and the Fool is such a brilliant relationship, and unexpected in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah, to be honest, I think I'm the same. I read it in, I must have been early 20s, but it was probably the first person fantasy that I ever, epic fantasy at least, that I ever read as well. And yeah, I absolutely adore it. I think it's brilliant, and the way that she has a habit of somehow creating the character in your mind in, not even like the main characters, like even the side characters, creating them in your mind in a very real sense in so few words. Like the moment you're introduced to Burrich, you basically who he is just from like the first line. It's just somehow she captures his entire essence in that one line, and then just builds upon it over the course of the series. And as I say, that's just like, he's just one of the side characters. He's not even the main character. Fitz is just wonderfully complex in so many ways, and so damaged as well. It's brilliant. I'm actually rereading the Farseer trilogy at the moment.
Oh, really?
So the very fancy illustrated 25th anniversary illustrated editions.
Right. Yeah. Book.
So I'm giving those a reread through at the moment. I'm absolutely loving it.
Yeah, they're great. I love how there's some payoff that she puts into it that you like. Well, there's hooks that she puts into like the first book that aren't paid off until like the 5th or 6th book, in the second trilogy and stuff. But she has that confidence where it's like, what, people are going to stick with me, and they're gonna see this when it happens, that this is the payoff to this thing that happened all this time ago. She's a brilliant writer. So Wheel of Time, you just mentioned that you've just listened to the first one.
I have, yes.
Yeah. Obviously on this channel, I do a Wheel of Time show as well with it's called Easing the Reader. And we talk about, I'm one of these weirdos that have read the Wheel of Time like about 20 times. I started reading it when I was a young teenager, and it was in between book releases, and so I was kind of like, I read them all in between, I think, the 8th and 9th book coming out, and then the release schedule started getting longer, so I kept on just rereading them before new books came out. And obviously Robert Jordan died, and then it was like 5 years, so I was like, I'll just keep rereading these until the next one comes out. So the other person on the podcast has never read them, so we're kind of reading them through together, and we're kind of discussing them. And he's also a fantasy writer, so we kind of look at it from like writing point of views and all this kind of stuff. And we talk about the TV show as well. But I'm always fascinated with, particularly the first one, when people now go and read that first one for a first time that have read quite a lot of fantasy like you have, because it kind of doesn't do anything new. So when you read it now, but back then it did and it didn't, because it's obviously very inspired by Lord of the Rings. It's crafted to be that way, Arthurian legends and everything like that. And as the series goes on, it does its own thing. But that first one always, the reaction that people get from it always intrigues me. So what was your enjoyment or not enjoyment of it?
Okay, so it was weird. I enjoyed it. I was not blown away by it by any stretch, but I did enjoy it, and I think that it has. I think Idleworld has a lot of problems when looked at through a more modern lens. It does things that were very acceptable back then, which these days aren't so acceptable. And there's, and I don't mean in sort of terms of sensibilities, but more so much of the tension in book one, at least, is because nobody freaking talks to each other.
No one talks to each other, unless they're doing a massive info dump where, like, the first part of the whole book is like new people arriving at like, there's a new person just arrived in Emmons Field. I'm going to tell you a story. And it's like this, and then it's like someone else also arrived, they're going to tell you a story as well.
Exactly, and there's so much, and it just keeps happening throughout. And like, even when they started, they're like, there's the point. I don't know about. Should we do some spoilers? Am I allowed to do some spoilers?
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Fine. There's a point where like the kids actually talk to Moiraine about their dreams that they've been having with the Dark One. And then they have another dream about the Dark One, and they don't tell her about it, and it's like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So there's some things like that, and then like the bad guys just appearing right at the end out of nowhere.
Right, it's just very sudden, isn't it?
So I think a lot of those things you don't get away with these days.
Right.
Sure. They'd be seen as like plot holes, or just like, this is a cheap way of creating tension.
Right. On the prologue as well, which is, the prologue is infamous, I think, with in general, because a lot of people don't get past the prologue because it's just so bewildering to people. And I remember reading it back in, when did I read that? Maybe 1997, 1998, and I was like, what is this? Right?
Yeah, it just like, it tells you nothing, but then it just throws terms at you, and like, and you start there going, all right. I got no idea what's going on here, but all right.
And to be honest with you as well, as a new reader, you won't know what's going on in that prologue for a few books, really. And then next, if you ever go back and you finish the series and go back and read the prologue, you'll be like, oh yeah, I understand this now.
yeah. But at the time, no, it makes no sense. It was one of that, because I was like listening to it, and I was listening to the new version with what's her name, Rosamund Pike, who did the narration for it, who plays Moiraine in the show. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's an excellent narrator, but it was one of those where I had no idea what was going on in the prologue, so I just let it all just wash over me, kind of like, yeah, okay, sure, yeah. I imagine I've heard the characters get better as well, which they kind of have to, because random matter pricks.
I think you went into that kind of, and I think this is one of the things that the TV show did a lot better, whereas they aged them up a little bit, because in this is what the other guy that's on the podcast said this quite a lot about Eye of the World, that they're like 18 and 19, but and they are from this like sheltered kind of very out of the way place, but they're like mentally they're like 9-year-olds.
Yeah, they do come across as little children.
Yeah.
Which they're clearly not. But yeah, it's maddening. But at the same time, I can easily see how it has influenced so many works that have come after it.
Right.
You can just see little things like even Perrin's storyline with the Wolf Brother. It's just like, was that part of the inspiration behind Fitz in the Farseer trilogy? Because it certainly feels like there's a lot of similarities between the two there.
Right.
So I think that you can really see a lot of the inspiration that it's had in subsequent series that have come over the years.
What did you? I presume you watched the TV show. What did you think of it? Just nodding.
It was a TV show. I don't know. It was convoluted. It tried too hard to do way too many things. At no point did it just let you sit and get to know the characters. It was constantly just like, hey, here's another scene with shit happening. I thought it was a bit of a mess, to be honest. I imagine they can possibly save it as it moves forwards, but yeah, it felt like it was really rushed. Like, and so a lot of the choices, having read the book now or listened to the book now, a lot of the choices don't make any sense. Like, what was the whole point of going to Tar Valon? You could have just not done that and spent longer in other bits and given us time to actually get to know the characters properly and stuff. But instead, you're like, let's take them to Tar Valon before they ever get there.
I have a feeling. Obviously, we talk about the show quite a lot on the. I quite enjoyed it. I think it has got its issues. But I think one of the biggest issues of it came from, and this is a completely different discussion. Maybe we'll have this another time. But one of the biggest issues was that I feel like it was like Amazon's testing bed for how to do fantasy compared when they were getting Lord of the Rings ready, because they can't drop the ball with Lord of the Rings because of the size of the fan base and everything like that. And whether they will do or not, then maybe they will. But I think a lot of ways they were kind of like, let's see how cheaply we can make this first. And let's see, like, will this work, and will this work, and will this work? Hopefully they've learned a few lessons for the second season. And
I hope so. To be honest, I think both Netflix and Amazon should start taking lessons from Arcane on how to do fantasy, because it's astounding.
Brilliant. Yeah, it was really good. That was a nice and really nice surprise, actually, because it came out around the same time as well. Like The Witcher was just out and everything. And like, I don't know about you, but I thought Witcher season 2 was a little bit. Didn't quite.
Oh, I have big opinions on Witcher season 2. I thought it tried too hard to do a coherent story. I think it needed a few extra episodes and to do Monster of the Week style episodes to let us like really sit with the characters better. I find this so much. This is one of these things. TV shows these days don't let you sit with the characters and get to know them. It's part of why Arcane did so damned well, because there's scenes and there's just whole sections of each episode where you're just there getting to know the characters. And there are things happening, but it doesn't just like deliver what it needs to you into that scene and then quickly move you on to the next one.
Right.
Whereas, Witcher season 2 was just a rush of just like, we're moving the story forwards now.
Right. Yeah. It's like, we can teleport people around the place. Let's just do it all the time. And it's like, oh, yeah, maybe don't do that.
Whereas the whole thing about Witcher is he's a monster slayer. Let him slay some monsters.
Yeah, kill some cool monsters, man. We should do this another time and just talk about adaptations, because I love talking adaptations. I'm someone who's I'll tell you why off air, so people watching this might be frustrating, but if you want to know, ask me. I'm kind of pro adaptation in a lot of way, and I'm kind of sympathetic would be a better word for it, sympathetic towards adaptation sometimes, because there is a lot of hoops to jump through, and there's a lot of various people meddling with this should be this and this should be this and this should be this and what have you. But I do find the whole process fascinating, and talking about them and especially with other writers and kind of seeing like what they think about them. So we'll do a special one at some point. We'll talk about the good and bad ones. But I want to talk about your books again before we finish.
Oh yes. Technically, that is why I'm here, I suppose.
Okay, so you have a new book out, which is the 4th book in your latest series. It is Sins of the Mother. Beautiful cover again. Is Sean? Is Sean King?
That's Felix Ortiz doing the artwork and Sean King doing the design and typography.
Right.
Basically, they're my dream team. They're my two stars that I go to for all my books.
Felix is amazing. His covers are so good. So as we were talking about at the start, if you can cast your mind that far, it's hard to talk about a book without spoiling it. And obviously, when it's the fourth one in the series, it's even harder. So for people who are watching who may not have picked up this series yet, if you could just tell us briefly what it's about and why they should pick it up.
We'll start with book one, Along the Razor's Edge. So this series is about this character, Eskara Helsine, who you'll also see on all my artwork behind me. And it's sort of a dark twist on a coming-of-age tale of her rise to the mythical figure known as the Corpse Queen. It starts with her on the losing, as a 15-year-old girl, a sorcerer, very powerful sorcerer, on the losing side of a huge war. And then she's stripped of her magic and sent to a deep underground prison called the Pit. And then it's sort of like, it moves on from there. And it's all written in first-person perspective and from the point of view of a much older Eska looking back on her life, sort of like almost like she's telling her memoirs. And it's kind of, in many ways, it's like a anti-Kingkiller Chronicles, right. Whereas in Kingkiller Chronicles, Kvothe is very much he's a braggart. He's always talking himself up. I'm a legend. I did this, and this. Right. And in this series, Eska, she suffers from a lot of depression and anxiety, and she'll quite happily tell you of how horrible a person she is and how she made mistakes. So in many ways, it's sort of the antithesis to Kingkiller Chronicles.
which is another interesting discussion to have, because it's like, how much of that is real or not, right? Like, is he?
Yeah, well,
who knows if it'll ever be finished? And the other reason why this is kind of the antithesis to the Kingkiller Chronicles is because you're actually writing them, and we're up to book 4.
That is true. Yeah. Book 4 is just released, and I'm currently writing book 5 with the hope of publishing it in December.
Yeah, Death's Beating Heart. I think the 5th one is.
That's correct. That is the 5th and final book.
Interesting. I was going to ask you how long the series was going to last, so the 5th and final. So yeah, people watching, if you haven't checked out this series yet, the War Eternal series, I have the 4th one ready to go on my Kindle. It's a great series. It's actually not because you're here, because you know I enjoy your books anyway. I think this is your best series so far out of everything that I've read. It's really, really good. The quality is amazing. So check those out. So you're writing the 5th book. Hopefully have it out this year.
Fingers crossed.
I think Amazon tells me it's out on Boxing Day. But we will.
That is the date I set for it.
We'll see that. What holds?
I'm aiming for it, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. I mean, I'm currently about 55,000 words in, but I think it's probably going to be the longest of the series so far, because it turns out I've got a lot of threads I still need to tie up.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what happens. That's what happened. I as an aside, my series, I planned on that being a trilogy, and I was getting towards the end of the 2nd book, which was a lot bigger than what I thought it was going to be. I was looking at my overall outline for the series, and I was like, it's going to have to be 4 books, I think.
Well, funnily enough, I've got an epic fantasy. I've written the 1st book, and I've got the 2nd book I still need to finish writing, and that's going to be coming in the next few years. That's called Herald, Age of the God Eater. Very cool. Anyway, and I've been looking at book 2, and I'm like, okay, so there's this. This book's going to be like 400,000 words.
Right. Yeah. It's like,
I don't know. It's just like, oh man, that's going to be way too long. Yeah. Brandon Sanderson level length for book.
Yeah. It's like you need a wheelbarrow if you're going to buy it in the shop and take it home. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No. Well, anyway, best of luck with that. Thanks so much for coming onto the show. We definitely have to do this again at some point and talk to you for hours. And best of luck with book 5 for the writing of that and whatever comes out next in 2023. So where's the best place for people to keep up to date with all of your work?
Well, you can keep up on my website, which is www.robjhayes.co.uk, or my newsletter, which you can find a link to on the website, or just follow me on Twitter, I guess is probably a good one. I'm quite active on Twitter, which is @RobOfTheHaze. Yeah, that's probably it. Or follow me on the Wizards, Warriors and Words podcast with Jed Hearn, Michael R. Fletcher and Dirk Ashton, as we talk around a lot of shit and take the piss out of each other a lot.
Excellent. All those links will be there below, so please do go and check those out and check out Rob's work and get in touch, leave a review, let him know what you think about them. If it's a 1-star review, he may well send it out in an advertisement of some kind.
Yes, I will use your 1-star review to sell more books. Be warned.
Excellent. Rob, thanks so much for coming on. Really, really enjoyed it. And for everyone who stayed with us till the end, until next time.